At 2 a.m., a single phone call shattered a 20-year dream. Ice Cube learned the final Friday movie was dead. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind the laughter, behind the legendary porch, lies a story of secret feuds, tragic deaths, and battles between an artist and a corporation that nearly buried the franchise forever. What secrets were hidden from the fans all these years? And why did Hollywood almost let this cultural phenomenon die? By the end, you'll never see Friday the same way again. Born from Fury. Everyone assumes Friday started as a light-hearted idea. Two friends joking about neighborhood life.
I'm just a little frustrated with the process. I would hope New Line would do the right thing and get a movie back so we can go make it for real. We still fighting a good fight. There's a movie to be made. We'll figure it out one day.
That couldn't be further from the truth. Friday was born from anger. Ice Cube was furious, burning, transformative anger at how Hollywood portrayed black neighborhoods. Every movie about South Central Los Angeles in the early 90s focused on violence, gangs, and despair. Films like Boys in the Hood and Colors told important stories, but they ignored the laughter, the joy, the ordinary moments of life. Cube, who starred in Boys and the Hood, respected those films, but he knew his childhood and the community he grew up in were more than struggle. They were filled with humor, resilience, and good days. He wanted to show that life in South Central could be authentic, complicated, and funny.
Man, it's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to make this the biggest Ice Cube show,
Friday wasn't just a comedy. It was a mission, a cultural correction, a middle finger to a Hollywood that refused to see humanity in those neighborhoods. When Cube told his inner circle he wanted to make a comedy, the reaction was disbelief. This was the hardcore rapper from NWA, known for raw, angry, a confrontational music. Albums like AmeriKKK's Most Wanted and Death Certificate cemented his persona as unflinching and political. To make a comedy seemed like career suicide, but Cube had a response that shut down every critic. I'm a reality rapper, and reality includes good days too.
You are very good at seeming angry. I don't know if you are angry in general, but in the movies, in 21 and 22 Jump Street, you're disgusted with...
Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum, wouldn't they piss you off?
He refused to be boxed in, determined to show that complexity could coexist with humor. The stakes were enormous. Cube and DJ Pooh were prepared to finance the entire film themselves, maxing out credit cards and risking financial ruin. Inspired by Robert Townsend's Hollywood Shuffle and Kevin Smith's Clerks, their plan was simple but extreme. Minimal cast, skeleton crew, one primary location, bare-bones budget. And for a moment, even black and white filming was considered to save costs. Imagine Friday in black and white, and the sun-soaked Los Angeles aesthetic that became iconic wouldn't exist, and the cultural impact of the film would have been fundamentally different.
When I found out that you wrote Friday, I was like, that's insane. That's incredible.
Yeah, me and DJ Pooh.
That's a funny fucking movie.
Yeah.
The pressure was suffocating, the risk enormous, but Cube and Pooh were committed to telling their story their way. Then a single call from New Line Cinema changed everything. What most fans don't realize is how deeply personal the script was. Craig's absurd day-off firing? True story, based on Cube's cousin. Smokey navigating a dangerous supplier? DJ Pooh's experience. Debo, the neighborhood bully? A real person whose presence could shift the energy of a block. Even the smaller characters, Azal, Felicia, Big Worm, were drawn directly from real life. Craig's father, played by John Witherspoon, blended humor and wisdom, reflecting the men Cube and Pooh grew up with. Every joke, Every interaction, every moment of tension was rooted in lived experience. That authenticity is why the film resonates decades later across cultures and generations. Friday isn't just entertainment. It's a love letter to a community, a record of lived experience, and a proof that when artists tell their own stories, even the smallest details can become iconic.
Don't take a hit.
Got a drink.
Craig, man, stimulate your mind. You ain't got shit to do. Put it in your mouth.
Shut up.
Forged in spaghetti. Imagine spending months crafting a character drawn entirely from your own life. Every joke, every gesture, every reaction, and then being told you're not good enough to play it. That's exactly what happened to DJ Pooh. Smokey was him, his personality, his experiences, his stories, from navigating the dangers and absurdities of South Central life. But New Line Cinema had one brutal word: no. They didn't see him as bankable, wanted a bigger name to sell the movie. He forced Pooh to step aside into a minor role as Red. Can you imagine watching your own life lived by someone else? That kind of rejection could destroy a person, but Pooh stayed supportive, putting the movie's success above his own pride, a rare integrity that ultimately made Friday possible. Before Chris Tucker became Smokey, the list of contenders was wild. Chris Rock was considered, which would have made the character sharper, more observational, less chaotic. Tommy Davidson was in the mix, promising energy but a different comedic flavor. Ice Cube, however, saw someone else, a young comedian from Atlanta performing on Def Comedy Jam, with wild, unpredictable energy, a voice that could go from charming to threatening in seconds. That was Chris Tucker. He had just moved to Los Angeles with nothing but talent, ambition, and confidence. He building a reputation for manic energy and originality. Cube was convinced this was the perfect Smokey, but Tucker's first audition was a disaster. Exhausted from the road, unprepared and mentally scattered, he delivered a flat, lifeless performance. The studio doubted him immediately, and in most cases, that would have been the end. But director F. Gary Gray saw something others didn't: a spark of genius, raw comedic talent waiting to emerge. Gray fought hard for Tucker, lobbying skeptical executives for a second chance. Tucker needed guidance, confidence, and support, or the opportunity would slip away. That's when Angela Means, newly cast as Felicia, stepped in. Observing Tucker's struggle, she invited him to her house for dinner. I'd imagine the courage and generosity it took. A young actress risking her own footing in a competitive set to help someone else. Over homemade spaghetti, she coached him scene by scene, helping him understand the rhythm, soul, and world of the character. She didn't just teach lines, she helped Tucker embody the spirit of Smokey. By the end of that night, Tucker was transformed. Returning for his second audition, he was unstoppable. The man who had nearly blown his shot became the legend audiences would remember for decades. One of the greatest comedic performances of the 1990s was born in a humble kitchen over spaghetti, thanks to the mentorship, generosity, and insight of a colleague who refused to let talent go to waste. Tucker's Smokey was no longer just a character. He was the culmination of real-life experiences, guidance, and the unshakable vision of those who believed in him when the rest of Hollywood hesitated.
The Hollywood sign, that's what you thought of with LA for the last 2 decades. What did he mean to people here?
You know, people don't understand how much athlete like Kobe or Kareem or Shaq or Magic, how much they really hold this city together.
Improvised genius. When you watch Friday, you're watching a carefully written script, but you're also watching magic that was never written down, spontaneous moments of brilliance, that the camera happened to capture. Chris Tucker was given significant freedom to improvise and experiment, and he ran with that freedom in ways that elevated the entire production. Many of his most quotable, most memorable moments were made up completely on the spot. Spontaneous reactions and additions that felt so natural you'd swear they were scripted. The filmmakers recognized his improvisational genius early and made the smart decision to let him play within the structure. They would film the scripted version exactly as written to ensure they had something usable, then let Tucker try variations and alternative takes. Some of his wildest riffs and most unexpected choices made it into the final cut, creating moments that feel genuinely alive and unpredictable rather than rehearsed. This wasn't random, undisciplined improvisation where an actor just does whatever feels good in the moment. Tucker understood Smokey so deeply, had internalized the character so completely, that his spontaneous choices always felt authentic and true to who this person was. That's the mark of true comedic genius, the ability to improvise in character, to make choices that serve the story rather than just showcasing your own cleverness. And speaking of iconic moments, the most famous line in the entire movie came from Angela Means completely breaking the script. So here's what was supposed to happen. Felicia walks up to the porch, talks briefly, asks for something small, gets rejected, and leaves. Simple, straightforward, forgettable. But Angela Means decided Felicia would be the type of person who completely invades your personal space without realizing it. So without telling anyone, she sat down right between Ice Cube and Chris Tucker on that porch. Watch the scene again, knowing this context. Tucker's reaction, that shocked, genuinely irritated expression, isn't acting. He was legitimately annoyed that she sat down between them without warning. That authentic moment of surprise made the scene legendary. Ice Cube's dismissive "Bye, Felicia" was the perfect response to Tucker's real frustration. And the line that would echo through pop culture for decades came from a moment of genuine, unscripted annoyance rather than carefully crafted comedy writing. But here's what most people don't know. Angela Means later revealed that the fame from "Bye, Felicia" became both a blessing and a curse. She was a serious actress who had created an intense backstory for her character, imagining Felicia as a kind but troubled person misunderstood by her family and neighbors. She brought real depth to what could have been a throwaway role. But as the "Bye, Felicia" meme exploded across social media and became part of everyday language, something painful happened. People began harassing her in public, yelling insults at her on the street, calling her degrading names from the movie. And the line that made her famous also brought her years of genuine emotional pain. She felt dismissed, disrespected, reduced to nothing more than a punchline. The character she'd carefully crafted became a symbol for dismissing people, and by extension, she felt dismissed herself in ways that cut deep. Everyone assumes Ice Cube and Chris Tucker were actually smoking weed during filming.
Stop hitting it so hard. Hold up, you fucking up the rotation. Puff, puff, give.
That the performances feel authentic because they were genuinely high throughout production. That's completely false. Despite playing characters who spend the entire movie getting progressively more stoned, Cube made a firm, non-negotiable decision from day one. He would stay completely sober during the entire production. Why would he make that choice when being high might actually help the performance feel more real and authentic? And because this was his first movie as a producer, carrying responsibility that extended far beyond just his own performance on screen. He had a tiny budget of less than $3 million and only 20 shooting days to capture everything the script required. There was zero room for error, no safety net, no opportunity for expensive reshoots if something went wrong. He needed to be sharp, and focused every single moment, ready to make critical, creative, and logistical decisions at any time. Chris Tucker followed his lead, matching that professionalism despite whatever temptation might have existed. The discipline on set was intense and uncompromising, even as they created comedy that looked completely effortless and spontaneous on screen. $5,000 to forever, less than $3 million to make an entire theatrical film. 20 days to shoot everything from the first scene to last. For context that reveals just how insane this timeline was, most Hollywood comedies at that time cost between $20 and $50 million to produce and spent months in production. Friday was made for a fraction of that budget with a schedule that would terrify most experienced filmmakers. Every single decision had to be strategic and intentional. Every shot had to count, because there weren't resources for backup plans. There were no second chances, no elaborate reshoots, no room for expensive mistakes or indulgent artistic experiments.
Anybody who know this kind of living, anybody in any kind of neighborhood like this is gonna get it. And so sometimes when you focus just on, your clientele, so to speak,
the tight constraints actually made the movie better rather than worse. Those limitations forced creativity in ways unlimited budgets never could. They demanded efficiency that created intensity, translating directly to screen energy. And hidden in this production were two future stars making their debuts in ways most people never noticed. A 13-year-old Meagan Good played one of the kids on the street in a small role that gave no indication she would become a major actress. Years later, she'd be a leading lady in films and television. But here, she was just another neighborhood kid hanging around the block. And in a quick, uncredited appearance during a flashback scene, you can spot Michael Clark Duncan as a craps player. This was years before he'd become famous for The Green Mile and transform into one of Hollywood's most recognizable and beloved character actors. The late, great John Witherspoon later revealed something that shocked fans when they learned the truth about the production's finances. According to him, the main actors on Friday were each paid approximately $5,000. $5,000 total for a movie that would gross over $27 million at the box office and become a cultural phenomenon worth hundreds of millions across its franchise, merchandising, and lasting cultural impact. Witherspoon wasn't bitter about the money in interviews because he understood it was a low-budget independent film, where everyone was essentially taking a chance on something completely unproven. But it shows just how unlikely this success story really was. Nobody walking onto that set knew they were creating a classic that would be quoted for generations. They were just trying to make a good movie with almost no money and hope it somehow found an audience. What they created changed comedy forever in ways that extended far beyond just the box office numbers. Missing Smokey. The Friday feud. When Next Friday hit theaters in 2000, fans were stunned by one glaring absence: Smokey. The dynamic duo that defined the original film was suddenly broken up, and for years, no one understood why Chris Tucker walked away from the role that had made him a star. The character that dominated conversations, inspired quotes, and became part of everyday language was gone.
That's Chris Tucker stuff. Just work it out amongst each other. So I always want to keep going up. That's why I never did a Fridays 2. I did it good. I want to do it well and keep moving. I wrote all my scenes in that movie. And that's how I like to work freely. Like in Fridays, I work freely.
And the mystery fueled endless speculation. The truth, however, was far more complicated than anyone imagined. Ice Cube's version of events centered on money and religion. He explained in interviews that Tucker was offered between $10 and $12 million to reprise the role, a fortune for a character he had already perfected. So Tucker turned it down. Cube claimed Tucker had become a devout Christian and no longer wanted to curse or portray weed smoking on camera. two traits inseparable from Smokey. But when Tucker eventually spoke about it himself, he confirmed the religious aspect while adding crucial context. The cultural impact of Friday was bigger than he had anticipated. He felt uneasy representing and essentially encouraging behaviors like smoking weed, especially with younger fans watching. Beyond religion, Tucker had a broader philosophy. He avoided sequels, choosing instead to pursue roles that challenged him creatively. Staying in one character felt limiting, and stepping away allowed him to grow as an actor. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Shortly after leaving the franchise, Tucker would earn $20 million per film in the Rush Hour franchise, far surpassing the money he'd been offered for Friday. But money and faith weren't the whole story. Beneath the surface, there was tension between Tucker and Cube that few people noticed. Faison Love has hinted that a rift existed, growing from questions of creative credit. Tucker's improvisations and spontaneous genius were central to Friday's legacy, yet Ice Cube had created the script, world, and structure from his personal experiences. Who deserved ultimate credit? That question quietly poisoned their friendship. Some lines in Next Friday, particularly references to people claiming credit for the original script, were likely subtle jabs at Tucker, public airing of private disputes. But what unfolded behind the laughs was a collision of creative ownership and human pride. A reminder that even the funniest movies can carry serious tensions. Meanwhile, tragedy loomed over the cast. Bernie Mac, Pastor Clever, died in 2008 at 50 from sarcoidosis, leaving a profound gap in comedy and the hearts of those who knew him. John Witherspoon, the fatherly voice of Craig's household, passed in 2019 at 77 from a sudden heart attack. His comedic timing and commanding presence were irreplaceable, and Ice Cube has said he regrets not making one more Friday with Witherspoon before his death. Tommy "Tiny" Lister Jr., the terrifying yet beloved Debo, died in 2020 at 62 from cardiovascular disease. Lister nearly didn't get the role, but he transformed Debo into a character that balanced menace with humor, making him unforgettable. Anthony A.J. Johnson, Ezell, passed in 2021 at 55, a tragic reminder of struggles with addiction hidden behind laughter and physical comedy. Each loss chipped away at the family that had formed on set, a brotherhood united by a shared story, now slowly fading. As the years went on, the question of why Smokey left became less pressing than a far more urgent concern. How do you bring this family back together for one final chapter when so many of its original members are gone? Friday had always been more than a comedy. It was a community, a cultural phenomenon, and a deeply personal story that reflected real-life friendships, struggles, and triumphs. The departure of Tucker and the deaths of Witherspoon, Lister, Mack, and Johnson were a reminder that time doesn't stop for anyone. And the stakes for the final film are higher than ever. Can the legacy of laughter, love, and chaos be honored when so many of the people who made it legendary are no longer here? And if they succeed, what will the last chapter of this iconic story really say about the people behind it and the world they built together on that South Central porch? The fight for Friday isn't over. It's evolving. After 2 decades of battles, lost opportunities, and the shadow of absent legends, the story is finally reaching its final act. But what truths will Last Friday reveal? Which untold conflicts, hidden sacrifices, and secrets of the neighborhood will surface when the cameras roll one last time? And as Smokey returns and Craig takes the stage for the final time, how will the legacy of those who can't be there be honored or rewritten? The stage is set, but the story behind the story is far from finished. What will you discover when the curtain rises?